All right, the Pete Souza Show presented by Slovaceks. We are back with Mitt Winter. He's an attorney for Kenny Hertz Perry. That is in Kansas City. Also, former college basketball player, an expert on the NIL situation and sports law. Mitt, have you ever seen anything like this in your life?
No, it's very unique with all the change going on in college sports right now and just all the messiness of trying to create this news model on the fly. You know, a lot of people say it's like building an airplane while flying it. It's like building an airplane while flying it with no instruction manual. Really.
With no pilot.
Yeah, exactly.
What's going to be, like, who, I guess, what body, what particular person, what role needs to step up to change this thing? Who can do it that can commandeer a change?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the power to change really all lies with university presidents. That's really who controls the NCAA and what happens in college athletics. You know, a lot of times the ADs or the conference commissioners, they're the public faces, so they get blamed for a lot of this stuff, but they answer to the college presidents. And so any big change has to come from that high of a level, or like the board of trustees at a university, because they're the ones that really sign off on all of this stuff at the highest level.
What's it take to get to that level? Like what has to happen for them to get on board and to take action?
Yeah, I mean, the House settlement itself is some action because it's going to be much different than the way things have been in the past. You know, schools will now be able to just directly pay their athletes. And so that is a big change. So obviously that took some, lawsuits to make that happen. I think there's some more change that needs to happen if everybody wants more stability in college athletics, which is, I think, what everyone's really after. I don't think the issue now is whether, I don't think people have a problem with the athletes getting paid. I think everyone's kind of, gotten to be comfortable with that. The ADs, the commissioners, even the presidents now. But I think there's some other things that need to happen to bring that stability. So when rules are in place, there's not just constant lawsuits happening, because even coming out of the House settlement, there's still going to be more lawsuits, most likely, unless Congress comes in and gives the NCAA an antitrust exemption and some other stuff in a law they want. But I'm kind of skeptical that that's going to happen.
So we need, the thing is, and the House settlement, and I want to ask you more about that in a second. Obviously, there is some change coming, but it's like we need it right now, and we need sweeping change in order to, I think to say save it is a little too dramatic. What else could come out of that House settlement that the average person doesn't know about? You mentioned the contracts, but what else could come out of that can put up, you hear the term all the time, air quotes, guardrails, right? What other guardrails, now I'm falling victim to it, can come out of that?
Yeah, so the big ones are, right now, a lot of your listeners and viewers probably know that collectives are the ones paying athletes most of the NIL compensation. And collectives are really just groups of boosters that put money together and contract and pay the athletes. So the settlement is trying to move all of that process over to the schools. So there's going to be some new rules as part of the House settlement that really limit and restrict the types of deals that athletes can do with collectives and boosters. So there's going to be this new clearinghouse where all deals an athlete does with what's called an associated entity or individual, which just really means collective and booster, it's going to have to go through this fair market value analysis review that's going to be run by Deloitte. And so that's trying to move away from the boosters and collectives really funding all these NIL payments and letting the school take over that role. And there's going to be a cap on the amount of money the schools can pay, and then try to really limit what the boosters are able to pay on top of that, with the thought that that's going to bring some more, competitive balance to the scene.
Now, there's always going to be, that's a great answer. There's always going to be shadowy figures involved where there's money. But, doing what I do, going on the road and calling games, you have dinner with a college administrator on the sports side. They will tell you, stories that you're familiar with being a former athlete, but just like nightmare stories of middlemen getting involved, lying to the kid, right, to get him to leave, let's say, Alabama, to go to Tennessee, where he tells them you're going to get more money at Tennessee, when he actually hasn't even talked to anybody from Tennessee. You know, and has nothing to do with the school. Will the House settlement and what you're talking about, eliminating the collectives, not putting all the blame on them, but just getting some more structure in place, will that eliminate some of this?
Not necessarily, because you're still going to have collectives at a lot of schools, especially at P4 schools. They're going to have collectives because they know to be competitive in recruiting, they're going to have to, basically promise their athletes more money on top of what they're going to be able to pay under the cap. So collectives are still going to be around. And also now in the mix, most athletes at the P4 level, football and basketball at least, they have agents. And so those agents, even though they're technically not supposed to under the NCAA's tampering rules, they're in constant communication with coaches and GMs at schools now, well before the transfer portal opens. So they know what school might be interested in an athlete, throughout the season. So the House settlement itself is not going to have any rules that limit the player movement and the transferring that's going on right now. I think that's one thing that people want to get to eventually, but the House settlement itself doesn't have anything that's going to limit any of that.
So in your estimation, is this going to get worse over the next calendar year, or is it going to get better?
That's a hard question to answer because I think what we do know is there's still going to be more lawsuits coming out of the House settlement. And so the question is, what kind of instability does that bring to things that are planned as part of the House settlement? Because the cap that I mentioned on the amount of money that schools can pay to their athletes, that's really an antitrust violation, unless you have an antitrust exemption, which they currently don't. And those third-party rules, the limits on collectives and booster deals, that probably violates antitrust law too. So there's going to be lawsuits around those things. So no one really knows how long some of these rules that are coming out of the House settlement will be in place and how effective they'll be and how many challenges there will be to that. So I don't think over the next year that we're going to have instantly a ton of stability in this model that's going to be a long-lasting model right now. I think eventually what we're going to have to get to really bring that stability is a model where, like we have in the NFL and the NBA, where you have the Players Association and then you have the league, and they agree on what the rules are going to be. If you do that through true collective bargaining, you get an antitrust exemption for those rules. Right now in college athletics, we can't have collective bargaining because you have to be an employee to actually collectively bargain. So there are some efforts to allow college athletes to engage in what are people calling collective negotiation to create those types of rules. But that would probably take a federal law as well to change the law on what type of protections you get if you're not an employee. So I think eventually that's the kind of model we're going to have to get to bring that stability everybody wants.
When it comes to cooking at home, my fiance will tell you this. I'm a microwave guy. I'm not an oven guy. I want it now. Uh-huh. And part of that is my responsibility. That's partially my baggage. But I want something quickly. That federal law you mentioned, and I had a long conversation with a college basketball coach in the Big 12 this year, and flat out he's like, this won't be resolved until we get collective bargaining. How long would something like that take?
It depends on what Congress is willing to do. So right now, there are really two ways you could bring stability to college athletics. One, either Congress could pass a law that gives the NCAA and just college athletics in general an antitrust exemption. And that's what the NCAA and the conferences are pushing for right now. Because if they just get that antitrust exemption, they can put back in place the type of transfer restrictions we used to have where, all right, you can transfer, you get one free transfer, but after that, you have to sit out a year if you transfer. But without an antitrust exemption, you can't have those types of rules right now because federal courts have said they violate antitrust law.
And
So
by the way, just help me out for a second. You're the expert. For people that don't know,
yeah,
maybe kind of me, antitrust is a monopoly pretty much, right?
yeah, basically it's when competitors get together and set rules. Like the NCAA has been in trouble over the last 15 years for violating antitrust law because all the schools have gotten together as competitors and say, this is the maximum amount of money you can pay to an athlete. So they've been sued a bunch for that. And same with the transfer rules, that the schools have gotten together in the past and said, athlete, if you want to transfer, you're going to have to sit out a year, or we'll give you 1 free year. You can transfer, or 1 free transfer. If you transfer again after that, you have to sit out a year.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
Since that's competitors getting together and colluding to set these types of rules that limit economic activity, they're problematic.
Okay, so I interrupted. So you were saying, they have to clean that up, and then carry on.
Yeah, so there's 2 ways to get around that. One, Congress just gives NCAA college sports an antitrust exemption, or you engage in collective bargaining, collective negotiation. Like at the NFL and NBA level, when they agree on those rules with the athletes, you get an antitrust exemption for those rules. So those are really the 2 ways it can happen. But right now, like I said, since the athletes aren't employees, they can't have a players association. They can't collectively bargain. So there's an effort to get a federal law passed that would allow athletes to engage in collective bargaining without being employees. So we'll see what happens. It's either going to be the athletes are declared employees at some point and then are able to collectively bargain, or Congress does something else.
So you're an attorney, we mentioned, in Kansas City for Kenny Hertz Perry, obviously sports law. Are you involved with this, with what you do on a day-to-day? Like, have you become involved in this at all? Like, getting your hands involved?
Oh, yeah. I do, like, pretty much 100% of the work I do is in college athletics in the NIL space these days. Work with some schools, collectives, agents, athletes, and a lot of businesses doing different things in the college sports world. So, yeah, very, very, very heavily involved in everything going on, and it's a lot of fun. It could be or a lot more fun than some other areas of law that I can spend my time working in, especially as a former college athlete. It's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, dude, you're the perfect guy for it, which is, it's cool to know we got people like you out there, really, that have been on both sides of it now. When people, a couple more things for you and I'll let you go because I know you got a busy day. NIL, will teams, or let me put it this way, after the House settlement, right, will players still be able to use that marketing side of NIL? Like if there are, let's say, contracts for players, right, will they still be able to get money like through lucrative NIL deals?
Yeah, they will. So they'll still be able to do unlimited amounts of what a lot of people refer to as true NIL. Like if they want to go out and do an endorsement deal for Nike or Under Armour or any other business, they'll have carte blanche to do that as much as they want and can be paid as much as they want. There's no limits on how much they can be paid or that type of activity. It's just those deals with boosters and collectives that are going to have this extra layer of regulation to see if the amount the athlete's being paid for the service being provided is within fair market value. And then the agreements that athletes are entering into with the schools, they're still going to be considered NIL licensing agreements, but the type of activity under those agreements is generally going to be, we, the school, are licensing the right to use your NIL athlete to promote our school and our teams and our athletic program. In some cases, it gives the school the right to go out and partner the athlete's NIL with the school's trademarks with third-party businesses, depending on the school agreement. So that's kind of how this world's going to work. There's the NIL agreement between the school and the athlete, and then the athlete can go out and find any other third-party NIL deals that they want to go out and find.
All right, last thing for you. I'm an eternal optimist, but that's why I try to surround myself with realists like you. Where are we headed with this? Like, this is salvageable, right?
Yeah, I mean, no matter what model we have, college sports is not going away. I mean, that's clear.
Can I give the fist pump on the? Yes.
Yeah, it's going to look different, right? And we're in this time of really big change And change is always hard, whether you're inside or outside, where college athletics has been one way for a very long time. And now there's big changes coming, and people are still getting used to that. But no matter what model we end up with, whether Congress gives the NCAA an antitrust exemption, or whether the athletes end up, at least in some sports, being employees, whatever model we end up with, college sports, in my opinion, is still going to be a huge part of the United States, and people are still going to watch, and it's going to be just as great as it always has been. Just some of the internal, behind-the-scenes stuff is going to be different.
Mitt Winter, you should be a therapist when you get done practicing law, because you just made me feel a little bit better. Hey, where can people find you on Twitter? You're a tremendous follower, really, and you're someone who is constantly pumping out just quick, good tidbits of information as this thing continues to develop.
Yeah, at Winter Sports Law is my X/Twitter handle. So yeah, pretty active on there. I like to just kind of comment and discuss everything going on in the college sports world right now.
Yeah, well, I told you before we started, my man Fran Fraschilla asked for help. He said, I just need some information on this. This is right around the Final Four, and you stepped right in. I was like, damn, that's great stuff. Yeah. So I appreciate the work you're doing, man. Keep up the great work, and thank you for taking the time this morning. I know you're a real busy guy.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Mitt, take care, bud.
All right, talk to you later.
See you, bud.
Bye.